Hey North Coast, my name's Micah. I'm one of the drummers here on staff with the worship department, and I'm also a student in the School of Ministry, and I'm excited to bring you guys the Daily Dose for today. And as we close out this series on worship, I want to hit at John chapter 4, where Jesus is talking to the woman at the well, and she brings up worship, and she asks him, you're a prophet, we worship on this mountain, but you guys worship in Jerusalem, really focusing on where you worship. But Jesus hits at something completely different with how you worship and who you worship. So he says in verse 21, woman, believe me, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know, for salvation is from the Jews. And when he says salvation is from the Jews, he's talking about himself. Yet a time is coming and has now come when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for they are the kind of worshipers that the Father seeks. God is spirit, and his worshipers must worship in the spirit and in truth. And often when I've heard this passage taught directly on worship through music, we often tend to separate the ideas of spirit and truth, thinking of spirit as our emotions and how we feel, if we're into it, if our hands are raised, if we're on our knees, and truth as what we think about worship and where our mind is while we worship and what the lyrics are actually saying. And those are all good things, and those are all a part of worship. But what Jesus is getting at here is the root of all of that, because those are byproducts of what he's saying here when he talks about spirit and truth. And in reading more of John's gospel, when he talks about the spirit, he addresses in John chapter 16 to the Spirit as the Spirit of truth. And in John chapter 14, as EJ talked about in his daily dose, which is really good, he talks about how Jesus is the way and the truth and the life. So the Spirit and truth are attributes of who God is. And as a result of that, the nature of who God is determines the nature of our worship, because God doesn't change and our worship of him doesn't change. And when he is the root of our worship, not just what he can bring us or what he can give us or what we can get out of worship, he becomes the end goal. And our response is to who he is and not what we can get or what we can earn from him. I love in verse 24 when he says that God is spirit and his worshipers must worship him in spirit and truth. And that is a direct command. That worship is not just a suggestion, that it's not just whether you feel like it or whether you don't feel like it. We're commanded to worship, and God cares about how we worship him and what we say when we worship him and how we feel about it. And that's where the head and the heart come in. The head specifically, I think a lot of musicians like myself can tend to get focused on the music and how we feel in the moment, yet not really reflect on the words. And the heart, because oftentimes we can feel so many different things, yet God's word doesn't change and his truth doesn't change. So we have to be able to submit our emotions and our thoughts to who God is and root it in his nature and in his attributes. And when worship is rooted from who God is, we don't have to focus on earning his favor or on earning his attention, because he has done everything for us, and we can just sit positionally from his grace and just be able to thank him for that. And I think a challenge that I hope you all can take something from and enjoy is just to find a worship song that you sang this weekend or something in your venue that you love, and just look at the lyrics and find verses that correlate to those lyrics. And I'm sure those of you who are in the traditions venue who sing hymns will really have a good time with that. But for me, just doing that, it just fuels my worship, and I get to understand why I'm singing what I'm singing. So yeah, I hope you can all take that challenge and really enjoy it. Thanks for watching this series on worship. We hope that you all got to take something out of that, and we hope that you can apply it to your life and to worship. Have a great weekend.